Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Grace Takadaw, and I will present this paper entitled Forming Student Groups with Student Preferences Using Constraint Logic Programming. I wrote this paper with Ramon Prudencio Toledo of the Society of Jesus, and this is an extension of the poster presented at the 15th IEEE International Conference on Advanced Learning Technologies at Hualien, Taiwan. So this is how we will proceed with the presentation. First, I will give you an introduction. I will give you the motivation of the study and how the problem is defined in the literature. I will also be discussing the methodology used in this study, as well as the group formation strategy formulated, and then the CLP model, which was based on the formation strategy formulated, the experimental results, and lastly, the conclusions. Now, since this study is interested in long-term student projects, we want to look at how teachers form groups in their classes. Formation is very critical since students will have to work together in an entire semester or for some cases for an entire school year, such as in software development projects or thesis projects. Now, we observe that the composition of the group is critical. It matters a lot. So when teachers consider this well enough, it will be also a quite tedious process for the teacher so that the members can work well, meaning that they are compatible and well matched. Now, when teachers consider this well, they will have to find out what characteristics or student parameters will make them compatible. Now, an example of this is the grade acquired by the student, say for example in a previous subject, or or a score in a pretest given in the subject, or the GPA from the previous semester. Now, the teacher also has to think about whether it is wise to group high achieving students or to mix them up with low achieving students. Now, aside from grades, there are also some other student characteristics or parameters that can be included in the group formation strategy, but choices usually vary. Now, this present study will investigate on the student parameters and characteristics that should be included in the instructor-based group formation strategy. And we feel that the student preferences should also be considered. Now, this is a well-studied problem in the literature, and it is defined, the group formation problem is defined generally as a problem that involves two sets. We have a set of students S and a set of a set of groups rather, a set of groups G, where a predetermined number of students in the set S are allocated to a group in the set G using predetermined parameters and are subject to constraints. Now, quite a number of characteristics or parameters appeared in the literature, and they can be categorized into individual proficiency, which was already mentioned earlier. This may be again a score in the pretest, the grade in the previous subject, or the GPA from the previous semester. It can also be learning and thinking styles, such as the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or even the 6 thinking hats by Edward de Bono. It can also be theme roles, such as the Belbin theme roles. It can also be the personality traits, which can be based on the personality theory, with reference also to Kersey temperament sorter. And lastly, it can also be teammate preferences. Now, in the present study, we conducted a faculty survey. We conducted a survey among 17 faculty members of the Computer Science Department, the Information Technology Department, the Information Systems Department, and the Computer Engineering Department. We want to get the parameters and the conditions that the teachers used and which they perceive to result to a better grouping overall. We also interviewed 15 students from classes taught by the faculty respondents. So after all, they are the ones who are directly affected by the group formation strategy. And even in the collaborative activity. So their perception on their perception on group formation would matter. Now, since faculty respondents were asked to rank the parameters, the ordinal ranking was determined using Copeland's pairwise aggregation method, and the agreement between rankings was measured using Kendall's coefficient of concordance. And then the interview data was analyzed using a thematic approach. And then the formation strategy that we formulated based on the faculty survey and the interviews was modeled using Eclipse 6.1, the constraint logic programming system. And then each cohort produced will be evaluated using the metrics framework by Una et al. And the metrics developed in this present study. Now, first, let me show you the results of the survey. Okay, there are 3 figures in the slide. So let me first go to the first figure. Surprisingly, as you can see, there is very little concordance, meaning there is very little agreement among faculty members in terms of how groups should be formed. So in fact, instructor selection only ranks second. So it is still student selection, which is the most commonly used group formation strategy among teachers. So again, this is followed by instructors selection, and then followed by counting, and then followed by, lastly, random selection. Now, of course, this is contrary to the thesis of the paper, but however, we feel that most teachers, particularly the teachers who were surveyed, were not yet keen enough to discover the difference in terms of the consequences of these selection strategies. Now, we pressed on, however, and analyzed the ranking in terms of the student parameters. So again, it is still not a pretty graph since concordance is still low at 0.34. The concordance, by the way, of the previous figure, let me go back to it again. The concordance of Bayesian strategies is low at 0.18. Now, the concordance based on student parameters is still low. It's 0.34. Now, although it's low, we still got the ranking. So the ranking is as follows. First, you have individual proficiency. So this is how the faculty respondents rank the student parameters. So they considered individual proficiency as the most important, followed by the learning and thinking styles, followed by the team roles, followed by the personality traits, and lastly, the student preferences or the teammate preferences. So it is worthy to note that the faculty respondents feel that the teammate preferences should be given the lowest priority. Lastly, we asked the faculty respondents to rank the mixture methods. They are, again, it's not a pretty graph. They are consistent, however, with the previous results. So, but again, concordance is very low, is still very low at 0.18. Now, the odd-numbered mixture methods, by the way, refer to the heterogeneous. The even-numbered mixture methods refer to the homogeneous mixture method. So mix 1 and mix 2 would refer to the individual proficiency, mix 3 and 4 to learning and thinking styles, 5 and 6 to team roles, and then 7 and 8 to personality traits. Now, the ranking we got from the faculty survey for mixture methods is as follows. Heterogeneous individual proficiency, heterogeneous thinking and learning styles, heterogeneous team roles, and homogeneous personality traits. So also notice that we took out the teammate preferences from this portion of the survey. Now, based on interview results, it was group formation strategies. Now, we realized later on that more than half of the students we interviewed are were from the lower years, and those in the lower years still do not encounter or are not given were not given long-term student projects, so they do not know yet whether student selection is still a better strategy, even if it's a long-term student project. However, we still ask the students to rank parameters. Given, for example, that the instructors will still form the groups given their using their strategy. So a possible arrangement is as follows. First, student preferences, followed by the individual proficiency, and lastly by the team roles. Note, however, that these parameters just came from the students themselves. So we did not give them any choices as compared to the faculty survey, where we gave choices to the faculty respondents. For for the interviews, we did not give the students the choices for the possible arrangement. They also prefer heterogeneous mixture methods for the individual proficiency and team roles. They also mentioned that they would prefer a heterogeneous mixture method for whatever student parameters or characteristics that the instructor would include in the group formation strategy. Now, since the agreement between the faculty and the agreement between the faculty and the students are very low, we feel that a model with a fixed strategy would not be beneficial to all concerned. So we came up with a generic model in which the faculty can decide the parameters that he or she would want to be included in the group formation strategy. So the result of the ranking, however, still remains as a suggestion to the faculty. Now, since the students also insisted that their teammate preferences would be given the highest priority, we feel that these should be included in the model. So this is the general flow. So what you see on the slide is the general flow of the CLP model. So first, the variables are set using the facts from the student file, which contains the ID, the list of student parameters, and the list of preferred teammates. So in the sample shown, 0006 is the student ID, and then followed by the list of student parameters and the list of the preferred teammates, or the list of student IDs of the preferred teammates. The list of student parameters, however, include 84 here refers to the individual proficiency. This list here are the scores in the Felder-Silverman questionnaire for the MBTI learning style. And then Shaper here refers to the team role, and this list of values here would refer to the personality traits of the student. And then after reading the student file, so the group variables are then set using the student facts from the student file. Next, constraints are set. Now the constraints are set using the basic constraint and using the parameter constraint. What is the basic constraint? The basic constraint would state that the student should only be part of a single group, or of one group only, while the parameter constraints are set based on the parameters and the categories. Now each parameter fact in the parameters file would contain the parameter ID, the name of the parameter, the output type, whether it's single or multiple, the list of possible values for the parameter, the mixture method, so whether it's heterogeneous or homogeneous, the data type, whether it's a symbolic or integer, pre-processing, so whether the parameter would be pre-processed or not, and the similarity index. Now, pre-processed parameters will be categorized, so meaning those parameters which were indicated with a yes for pre-processing will be categorized and in effect will get new values. Now, why do we need to do pre-processing? The pre-processing was included to ease out constraint solving. Since there are some parameters with a lot of values, it would make setting the constraints very difficult. So to ease out the constraint solving, we included the pre-processing. Now the pre-processing would require the categories file, which contain categories or the category facts. Now each category fact will contain the parameter ID, the category ID, the category name, the inclusion condition, which can either be all, one, or between, and the list of possible values. Now, if the inclusion condition is between, then the list of values would only include the first value in the range and the last value in the range. Whereas if the inclusion condition is either all or one, then the list of possible values will have to include all possible values. Now, after pre-processing, the constraints are now set depending on the mixture method and the data type of the parameter. So since there are two data types, symbolic and integer, there are also two mixture methods, heterogeneous and homogeneous. This means that there are four possible constraints. Now these are integer, heterogeneous integer, homogeneous integer, heterogeneous symbolic, and homogeneous symbolic. Now the predefined constraints all EQ or all underscore EQ and all different will be imposed accordingly. So all EQ will be imposed for homogeneous constraints and all different will be imposed to heterogeneous constraints. Now, variables are then labeled. So in the next phase of the CLP model, now variables are labeled by calling the search predicate using a particular selection, choice, and search method. Now, the objective function is also computed using two separate metrics, the cohort constraint satisfaction quality metrics by Una et al. And again, the student preference satisfaction quality metrics, which was developed in this study. Now, in the same phase, each of the search methods, each of the 7 search methods, was tested using 50 randomly generated student records and 4 parameters for group sizes 2 to 8. Now, each query is run 10 times using each of the search method, and this is done to identify whether there is one search method that can produce solutions faster than the rest of the search methods. Now, however, using ANOVA, using analysis of variance, the p-value is very close to 1.0 at 0.99. So thus, any of the search methods can actually be used. So meaning, there is no single search method that can produce solutions faster than the rest. Now, since we are also interested in the grouping with the best possible cohort rating using the two metrics, now the predefined predicate using a branch and bound search was used. The table that you see only shows the 4 search methods with the lowest mean CPU time. Now, if we go back to the previous slide, okay, if we look at the means plot of CPU time, if we look at this graph, although again using ANOVA, there is no search method that can produce solutions faster than the rest of the search methods. But if we look at the graph, there are some search methods that consistently return solutions faster than the rest of the search methods. And these are bounded backtracking search, limited discrepancy, credit-based with bounded backtracking search, and then credit-based search with limited discrepancy search. So we used the 4 with the lowest mean CPU time in the next experiment. Now the table here again shows the result, the cohort rating using the 4 search methods, as well as the CPU time. Now, notice that only LBS um, has an actual CPU time. Now, what do these dashes mean? Now, the dash here would mean that the run was interrupted after a 24-hour period. So, meaning the cohort rating shown here is only the cohort rating, the best or the optimal cohort rating thus far in the 24-hour period. Now, since there are only four parameters in this instance, now a cohort rating of 4 would be perfect, but of course that would be quite impossible given randomly generated records or randomly generated instance. But the ratings, however, are quite high. Okay, if you notice, since most of them are, since at most three constraints were satisfied, and the fourth constraint to some degree. Now, these experimental results shown in this table was only for group sizes equal to 2, although we experimented for all group sizes from 2 to 8. Now, a similar experiment was also performed, this time to get the student preference satisfaction. And the table shown in the slide is only for the group size is equal to 6. Now, the result, however, is not as encouraging. So, since the cohort rating would in fact mean the number of preferences satisfied. So, out of 50 students, only at most the highest possible number of student teammate preferences satisfied is only 11. Although the runs again only although the runs were only run in a 24-hour period, we don't know, however, whether the cohort rating would improve if we did not interrupt the runs after a 24-hour period. Now, for the conclusions, as previously showed, there was very little agreement among faculty with regards to student parameters and mixture method. Now, we've realized, of course, again, that some of the faculty members who were included in the survey, who were respondents in the survey, did not use long-term collaborative activities or long-term student projects in their classes. And so they were not able to observe the difference between using an instructor selection and using either a student selection, random selection, or counting. Now, unsurprisingly, students also prefer that their teammate preferences are given the top priority. Now, because of this seeming disagreement between faculty and students, we thus suggest that an instructor strategy that considers student preferences should be instead used. Now, in a future study, we hope to compare the performance of students using this strategy, using an instructor as against a purely instructor strategy and a purely student selection strategy. Now, since the measures used in the study are quite disparate, in that one measure will be sacrificed for the other, we thus suggest that the objective function would include both the parameter constraints and the teammate preferences. Now, aside from showing that the student preferences can be included in an instructor selection or in an instructor-based formation, we also presented the generic model for the instructor-based formation using constraint logic programming. This can be used in, again, computer-supported group formation. So that would be all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. And I would also want to thank the organizers for allowing me to present my paper through this video. And for your questions, comments, and suggestions, please don't hesitate to email me at the email address flashed on the slide. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.